Hello everyone, and welcome to a preview of this year's September EMLA auction. And in today's video, we're going to be focusing on the Marvel Comics original art that's going to be featured in the auction. I wanted to show you a few of my favorite pieces that are in here. And we're going to start with an amazing Spider-Man number 32 page by the original creator of Spider-Man, Steve Ditko. So Steve Ditko was the original artist that worked on the first 38 issues of Spider-Man. After that, he left the series and never came back. But that run is probably known as the grail for all collectors and anyone that's interested in Spider-Man. And pages from Ditko rarely come to market. And I think what's great about this is not only is it a great two-thirds splash, as we would call it, but it features a great battle sequence between Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man, and it culminates in that final panel that just stands out from the page. But what's also great about this is it's a good example of Ditko's style. I think he was very innovative for his time, had great lush brushwork that you see here, and was really good at highlighting the darks and lights on a page. And I think that's especially evident here when you look at the way that he reversed out Spider-Man's costume and put it all in black, something that you didn't see other creators doing at the time. So just a great example. And for anyone that's just new to collecting or an advanced collector, this is a top-notch piece that anyone would love to have on their wall. All right, for our next piece, we have a piece by Jack King Kirby. Kirby, like Ditko, was one of the founders of the Marvel Universe, introduced characters like Thor, Ant-Man, most of the other Avengers, as well as the X-Men to the Marvel Universe. So in this first panel, we have Thor fighting the Executioner and his minions, but I think it's great to see the communist logo on that tank, and this is something you didn't see much later in the Marvel Universe. Typically they would be fighting against other superpowered villains or Norse gods, but something that just sort of marks the early age of Marvel and stands for that. But I want to call your attention to the bottom panel. There you'll see in her first appearance in this issue, Jane Foster, who became the love interest for Donald Blake and Thor, and that soap opera carried out over the ensuing issues. But just a great early example of Jack King Kirby, inked by Dick Ayers in this case. And pages from early issues like this are extremely hard to get, especially something as early as the second appearance of Thor. For the next one, something you may not have even seen, but is something that you may take an interest in. So you'll notice here this character that's lying down is Wolverine. And actually this is from the very first story featuring Wolverine. This is actually from a UK reprint that Marvel would do. So back in the 1970s, Marvel would take the stories from the US and reprint them in black and white in the UK. And then they would have new artists actually draw pages like this because they would split the story into two. And then they would have to sort of pick up in the middle of the story and establish where they were. And this was done for Hulk number 181, which was the very first issue that introduced Wolverine to the Marvel Universe. And in this case, they didn't ask the original artist, Herb Trimpe, to draw this, but they actually asked another artist. And the hints to who drew it are actually on the back, and you'll see two initials, JR and DV. And when we researched this, what we found is that JR is actually John Romita Jr., who is the son of John Romita Sr. But this was one of his very first works. He started in 1976 working for the Marvel UK division, and then went on to draw Spider-Man himself and also the X-Men at one point in time. And so I think it's an interesting part, not only because it's the first appearance of Wolverine, but it's also one of the very first things that John Romita ever drew for Marvel. So moving on, I wanted to move on and keep the X-Men theme going and showcase a couple pages from Fantastic Four number 286. I'll start with this page. So what's key, I guess, to know about this issue is that in this issue, they wanted to bring back Jean Grey, or Phoenix, who had died back in X-Men 137. In this story, they sort of go back in time, and on this particular page, you see the sequence in X-Men 100 in which Phoenix was born. At the end of X-Men 100, Jean Grey is on a space shuttle. She ends up piloting that and ultimately to her death. And then in X-Men 101, she's reborn as the Phoenix. And so this is a retelling of that by John Byrne and Terry Austin, who were the art team that ended up killing off the Phoenix. They actually brought them back together to tell this story. And on this second page, what we have is the origin of Phoenix as told by John Byrne. But this actually never saw print. And this is actually very cool to see. In the final version that got printed, you'll actually find this top panel up here, but the rest of this was actually changed. The editors asked Chris Claremont, who was the original X-Men writer and had killed off the Phoenix in X-Men 137, to come back and tell another origin story for the Phoenix character. And then they had Jackson Geist, another artist who went on to draw X-Factor, which this was actually an introduction to the X-Factor book, but they actually went back and redrew the final 5 panels from this. So here you have the originally intended page as intended by John Byrne, and pages like this, similar to X-Men 137, which has some similar pages, are very highly desirable by collectors out there. All right, so now I want to go to the other side of the galaxy and talk about Star Wars. Star Wars was a very important franchise to Marvel in the 70s, actually helped save the company. When the adaptation of the movie came out, they sold so many copies of that, it helped to keep Marvel afloat. So you'll notice that it says inventory at the top of the page. So this was a story that was done somewhere probably in 1978, but ultimately published in Star Wars Annual in 1979. The story featured Leia, Chewbacca, Han Solo, and Luke in a outer space story. But these stories for Marvel were key because they continued the adventures after the original movies and sort of helped bridge the gap for fans between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. You get to see all new adventures through the comic books. Interesting thing about this page is it was penciled by Mike Vosberg, but inked by Steve Leialoha. Steve was the inker on the original adaptation. He started with issue 2 and came on board. And then he got to an opportunity to ink this particular story, but he had a little fun with it, and I think it's kind of funny. As I was talking to him about this, I think as he was looking at Leia's buns in her hair, he sort of noticed the resemblance between another character as part of the Disney universe, Minnie Mouse. And so in this very bottom panel, what you'll see is a shadow in which it looks a lot like a little character named Minnie Mouse, and to emphasize that, he drew these whiskers down coming out of the shadow there to put a little inside joke into this page. So got published this way, but it's a great example of how some of the artists working on Star Wars had a little bit of fun. Well, that ends our preview of this year's Marvel Comics original art that's in this year's September EMLA auction. There are more pieces that are available, so check them out online, get the catalog, and look at everything that we have to offer. I think these are great pieces if you're a starter or you're an advanced collector of original art. They're an important part of the history of these characters and comics, and they look great on your wall. So hopefully you'll find one that you like and you can take one home with you. See you in September.